Thank you all for tuning in. This is Selena, and
Iman.
together we make you plus happy. Each week we bring you someone who challenges us to define success and happiness on our own terms with a dose of laughter.
Remember to like and subscribe at U Plus Happy. You can follow us on Instagram and on YouTube at U Plus Happy. Hey, Selena.
Hey, man.
How was your week? Anything happen worth sharing?
So many things, but no. I think the main takeaway was like, and I've said it before, just being grateful for my friends and my family, and just having people I can turn to and talk to when I need to, and call anytime or text anytime, and they're just gonna entertain my shenanigans.
That's important for
So,
sure.
so yeah, I'm just grateful. It's not like a long story, but just reflecting on that and not taking it for granted.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm gonna try and make it short because it is a bit long.
All right, here we go.
I had well, before I share, I have a disclaimer. There was a bit of a language barrier with the person that I was talking with. So I wasn't intentionally trying to be a butthole on purpose. So I just need to put that out there for the universe to know. But no, I had a reflective moment. So I was having a conversation with someone who was from Colombia, and we started talking about just like Colombia, the culture, the food, and so he's out here in Australia now, and we were talking about like our experience coming from a different country to Australia, and his first language isn't English. So it was a bit like choppy, like the conversation where he would have to clarify, or I would clarify, vice versa. And he mentioned, he was like, oh, the visa is so expensive because he's on a student visa. And I was like, oh, well, how much is it a year? And he's like, $15. And in my head, I was like, oh, well, maybe he's not, like he's getting the numbers mixed up. And I was like, oh, like 15, do you mean like 1.5? And like trying to clarify, he's like, no, like 15. And I was like, $15 isn't a lot for a year. And he's like, well, not for you, because you're out here working in a career. And I feel like I felt a little like a butthole because I wasn't trying to be like, I don't know. I just thought he was saying it wrong. So we got off the phone, not right after that, but it made me reflect though. And I was just like, in my head, I've never thought of like, oh, for someone, $15 a year is a lot. If you're like on a visa where you can only work so many hours. And yeah, I just was able to be like, I need to recognize my privilege in certain situations. Like even coming out here, I have a university that kind of helped me navigate the whole visa process. I didn't have to do it alone. I speak the
Yeah.
language. I came with the job already set up, whereas he didn't have any of that. So I walked away like, oh, Iman, like check your privilege, because sometimes it's easy to just be like, I guess not recognize it. So that was the aha moment for me where I was just like, oh, this process could have been so much harder, even though it was like a year process. I still had all these people supporting and like guiding me along the way. So that was my reflective epiphany moment.
That's amazing, though. It's so important.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like you were being a butthole. You just didn't know. I think, yeah, it wasn't malicious.
It wasn't.
So,
No.
and I think that's the most important thing. You weren't coming from a place of like, what? Oh my God. Like, you just never heard of that, which I haven't either. I would have said the same thing. Like, are you sure? Especially
Yeah.
given the background of the language barriers you all had, like in your conversation.
Yeah. But yeah, it was definitely going back to that grateful thing. Like I was like, oh, I'm really grateful that I had all this support, because
Yeah.
some people don't.
Yeah. And it's easy to take things for granted.
Mhm.
People, money, resources,
Yeah.
so it's nice to sit back and reflect, which we did.
Thank you.
Hey, learning out here in these streets. Ching.
Right?
Nobody gave me a 5 back. All right, cool.
Oh,
Ching.
and
Okay, this is it. All right. So who do we have on the show this week?
so this week we have Kesau'c Hill on the show. He is a poet and author of Serengeti Noise. After serving over 25 years in prison for gang-related murder, Kesau'c is now an aspiring poet and author, creative writing instructor, and youth mentor. He's a mentor at Tia Chuchu's Cultural Center Trauma to Transformation program. By blending the ancient art of poetry and storytelling, he shares his life journey full of trauma and transformation, raw honesty, poetic truths, and healing. So welcome, Kesau'c.
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Good. I don't know if you remember Selena from the poetry. What was that? Tia Chuchu's.
Well, we did radio theater too.
Oh, we did radio theater too.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Nice to see you again. Long time.
Good to
Mhm. Thanks so much for coming on. I'm excited about this.
thank you. It's my pleasure.
We'll hop in. All right. So, just the first question is, how did you get started with poetry?
I actually started writing poetry in a prison cell, juvenile hall. I didn't have anybody to write. And I remember, the only person to write was to myself. So I wrote, not realizing it was poetry, but it was just my thoughts. I was like, okay, this is just what I'm thinking. This is just pouring out. And then I would ball it up and throw it away. So but getting into the habit of that, it was more a form of expression. And then the artistic aspect of it came later.
Okay.
Was there a turning point where you realized you needed to take a different path than what was expected of you?
Well, that's a long story because I went to prison at 16 years old and I didn't come home until 44. So the journey between that time, becoming the person that I am today, becoming the poet, becoming the youth mentor, that was a journey, that had a whole lot of lessons in it. And when I go back into the institutions and I speak to the juveniles and I speak to the kids there, I bring that element, I bring that experience. So there's a whole lot to it because I got different mentors. I got a part in one of my poetries where I said I was raised by the best of society's rejects. We forget that prison is a colony of society's rejects. Me having to be raised there, I had to find the best, of that group to learn from in order to be, to get some type of value out of life because it's a prison and prisons are designed to dehumanize. It's designed to break, but it was never designed to put you back together again. It wasn't designed to fix you in any type of way. So you need that counseling. And for me, poetry was that counseling. Poetry was that avenue. And even to this day, it's so powerful. And it's not something I created. This is something that has been going on, since the dawn of humanity, since language was developed, it became an art. And poetry was one of those arts, and it turned into philosophy and, your Plato's and your Shakespeare's and your sonnets and all of these different, whatever language it is, no matter what culture or what traditions you go back, you see that there was a power in the spoken word. There's a power in that. Even religious, when you look at religion, it says in the Bible, in the beginning was the word. That you get this idea, of the spoken word, and all of the Abrahamic faiths refer to this reading or these words or this writing, which are all what we do, and we wonder why it's so attacked and why, it's something that's controlled, shall I say. It's not put in the mainstream anymore. It's something that's controlled because of the power that comes out of it and the transformation.
That's so true. You mentioned that like when you started writing, you weren't aware that it was poetry. Like when did you realize like, oh, what I'm writing is poetry? Or was like when...
Well, I started when I realized I was writing poetry. There was a contest, excuse me, in the youth authority. And by this time I was in college, see the difference between the youth authority for juveniles and the California Department of Corrections for men is there's no rehabilitation in the Department of Corrections for men. But when you're in the youth authority, due to the fact that you're ward of the states, they kind of, put a lot of effort and a lot of resources into that environment, but they're not going to make you do it. You got to be there to take advantage of it. So I was in college, and it's a long story because I was gangbanging and I was kicked out of school where I couldn't go to school with the rest of the population. I had to go to the hole in order to go to school. So one teacher named John Murphy, allowed me in his class, and he was one of these, teachers that had a way with the worst of us, and he allowed me in his class. And I wanted to learn computers. So he said, well, in order for you to get on the computer, I need you to read a paragraph and I need you to write something on it. So we had got to a point where we were on Maya Angelou, and we had to write a poem. So I wrote this poem, absent of most of the grammar, and he corrected it with the grammar and he read it out loud. And I was like, wow, I know I wrote that, but I didn't write that, but I know I wrote that. So he was like, this came from him. So now I was kind of put on the spot, and I took my writing a little more serious after that. I started to write a little more and a little more. And then he took me and put it into a contest. And I ended up called Phoenix, and I ended up winning the contest. And then there was a sister staff that was there who took one of my poems and entered it into a Essence magazine award. Wow. And I got third place for that. So then now I'm thinking, whoa, this is crazy. People are actually liking this stuff. And to me, it was just a pouring out, and I was amazed that people, liked it. And that's where I understood that it wasn't just a healing for me, but it was also, transformative. But I didn't become a poet until I did solitary confinement. Now I'm in CDC, and I had rose into the gang politics. Now I'm shot caller, I'm leader. Now there was a riot that happened, and the police, to show they're the authority, they took all of the people that had leadership roles and they put us in solitary confinement, shipped us into different places. And I spent 98 days, without any human contact, except for them coming to give me food, or every 3 days I get 1 hour to walk in the day room and take a shower. So while I'm in the cell, though, you go through a whole lot. And I didn't fear a lot of prison. I didn't fear dying. I didn't fear, the riots. I didn't fear getting stabbed. I didn't fear the police. I didn't fear any of those things, with the exception of losing my mind. I feared going insane. And because I thought, one, I wouldn't know. I'd be the last to know. How could you know? You're insane, So, and that was the fear to me. And when they put me in this place, I was crushed in that. I tell people I lost my mind so that I could find my heart. You see, they intended to break my mind, but they didn't know that the heart operates separate from the mind. So when they went for the mine and they put me in that place, there was a breakage. Like I always tell people, everyone came to me in that time. Every memory, you know, that I thought I forgot, you know, every face that I thought I forgot, you know, every shadow, every light, every love, every hate, every tear, every laughter, everything came to visit me in that space. But it, you know, why, as a time goes by, the walls begin to close in on you. You know, the space begin to get smaller, smaller, smaller to this. It feels like that concrete is crushing you. So for me, I started writing poetry on the wall. And I wrote poetry on everything from the ceiling to everything, you know, and with a pencil. Now, with a pencil, if you write on the wall and then you take your finger and smear it a little bit, it bulbs, right? Like graffiti. So I had this poetry all over the wall.
Wow.
And so they brought in the psych, you know, to see if I was losing my mind finally, because it took me writing all over the walls, right? But they came in, they brought in the psych, they took pictures of it. And with all the exception of one poem, you know, they told me this one woman told me I could leave on the wall. And it was a poem called People of Snow or People of Cold. And during that time, you know, I finally made it out of there. You know, if somebody called my sister and them not hearing from me, you know, came to check on me. So they had to let me out. And after that time, I walked out a poet because now my poetry wasn't just about writing what I felt creatively on a piece of paper. There was conviction in my words now. There was honesty in my words now. I walked out a different person because now, like I told you, there was a breakage. And this breakage was, there was no more shame in me. I had realized then in that small space, during that breakage, that I had paid for everything that I had done wrong. And I had paid for everything that had been done wrong to me. And the only thing that was left was what I, you know, proceeded to be at that moment, at that time. So when I walked out of there, I walked out of there a different person. I walked out of there a poet. I walked out of there a mentor. And it was at that time that I realized that I had outgrown prison. Because there was nothing more prison can do to me. You put me in the bottom of the prison and I'm still here, you know? So there's nothing more that you can do for me or do to me. And I knew that I'm going home soon. And some 4 years later, I ended up home. Three years later.
What made you feel like when you left that you were going to go into mentorship and you were going to take your poetry further? I mean, you kind of explained it in your answer in what you just described, but more so, what made you do the mentorship part of it?
Well, I always knew I wanted to do that.
Okay.
I remember telling a friend of mine in the youth authority, I said, one day we're going to get out of here. And remind you, we had life sentences. Like we had governors like Gray Davis and Pete Wilson that was saying, we're never coming home. You know, Gray Davis said, you took a life, you're not going home except in the pine box. And Pete Wilson wouldn't even talk about it. He just had a 99.9% denial rate. You know, so we were living in this time where there was very little hope of us coming home with a life sentence. And it was during this time that I told him, and he talks about it to this day because he mentors also. And I said, I told him, we go get out of here one day. And I said, we just got to be prepared. But what we do is we're going to get out of here and we're going to take children, we're going to put them through a rites of passage. We're going to take them into the wilderness and we're going to mentor them how to survive in the wilderness, and we're going to take them out the hoods. You know, and we're going to do, and he was like, yeah. But when I got out, you know, I ended up with Tia Chuchas, you know, and I saw the opportunity to mentor. So when I started working with Louise, I kind of like, look, you guys talk to you. Can I talk to him? You know, give me the opportunity to talk to him. So when I did, he was like, whoa, you know what I'm saying? This guy, and I'm telling him I have this thing. Someone has said, if something comes naturally to you, then it was your calling.
Mm-hmm.
If it's naturally to you, then that means you've had practice at this many of lifetimes before.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? So what happens is we get into this culture, and this culture has a tendency to coach those things out of us. You know, like your mom might want you to be a carpenter, you know, but that's not what you want. You got this violin over here, you know, that you has burning desire to play this violin, but then they squash that desire, they squash that fire, you know, and that purpose in order to fit into social norms, or what they consider to be social norms, right? Well, my social norm was supposed to be prison.
Mm.
I was supposed to recidivate. I was supposed to go back to prison. Remember, I was supposed to be going in and out. I wasn't supposed to get out. And when I got out, I wasn't supposed to be able to adapt and make it out.
Mm-hmm.
But purpose was all before me. I got out, and this is a true story. I'm sitting in the halfway house. Now imagine, if I can get you to understand, if when you're in prison, it's not just deprivation of freedom. We're talking about sensory deprivation. There are no loud colors in prison, with the exception of the orange that you wear.
Yeah.
You don't see red, you don't see green, you don't see blues and blacks and purples and pinks and collages, and you don't see these things. You don't smell Burger King. You don't smell perfumes. You don't smell, you know, exhaust from a truck passing by. You don't hear the laughter of a child. You don't hear the voice of a woman. You don't hear a car, you know, or a motorcycle going by. You don't hear a dog bark. Imagine 27 years, almost 30 years of being deprived of these sounds, these smells, these things, these senses that we take for granted every day. And then they throw you into society and boom, you're bombarded with it all. I'm smelling things I have never smelled. I remember jumping out of my bed at 1 a.m. at the halfway house because the neighbor's dog barked.
Mm-hmm.
Me and myself, we both were fresh out from doing life sentences, and we heard the dog bark, and we ran to the window trying to see the dog, but it was a fence that was blocking us, and we wanted to see the dog. Now, other people would look at grown men acting that way as something infantile or, you know, crazy, but not understanding that we've been deprived this for almost 3 decades. So all of this stuff is coming. During this exact same time, me and my curiosity, I walk to USC campus, and I sat in a class. It was a sociology class, and they was talking about at the time prison reform.
Mm-hmm.
I sat out in the class, you know, listen to the whole class. Next day, I come back and do the exact same thing. This time I ask a question. The question sparked conversation in the class. Then I come back maybe a day or so later. I think I missed a couple of days, and I come back, and then there's this debate I'm having with the guy. I swear to God, I end up on the stage before they found out I'm not even enrolled in the school. You know what I'm saying? I got photos of it and everything. I'm sitting on a stage debating with college professors, you know, about social reform. And it was like, and I'm telling them I'm fresh out. You know, I just walked in the class, and they thought that was amazing, you know, an amazing thing. And it was in that school also that I ran into Luis Rodriguez and Michael Mead drumming, you know, and having a drum session and doing poetry. And I said, oh, this is where I gotta be. And it took me there, and I was like, hey, look, I've been wanting to mentor. You know, as soon as I said that, the doors were open. There were always opportunities for people, you know, to for me to speak to. And it wasn't just the fact that I was speaking, there was a gift, a relation that I could, you know, kind of reach the hardest of, because I was one of them. And I always tell them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm like that. I love your story, and I've heard bits and pieces of it before, but not to this extent. But I remember when you came and talked to my boys at the middle school, and those were some of the hardest boys on campus, and you could hear a pin drop when Kesau'c was speaking. Like everyone was focused, everyone was listening, and like you said, it is a gift, and it's really hard to walk in a room and just demand people's attention. And I feel like you're really, really good at that. So I'm glad that you were able to recognize that, because I think so many of us have these gifts, and for whatever reason, we're afraid to show them, or we kind of keep them to ourselves. So I'm so glad that you were able to tap into that and be like, I'm gonna let the world see this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without shame. Because, and that's another thing, because a lot of guys that get out, they want to mentor.
Mhm.
They want to give back, but there's so much shame in the way that they come off in, a little less than authentic, and because children can pick up on that.
Mhm.
They are vibrating at a way that sometimes that we forget. We like to, we dumb them down. Oh, they don't know. No, they know. You know what I'm saying? Oh, they're just kids. They're not paying attention. Oh, yeah, they see. And it's like, because they vibrate on a level that we don't really give them the credit for sometimes. And so when you come in and you're holding things back, they can feel that. They can feel when you're holding things back. And the way to reach them is to go all in with them, and to do that, you got to be at peace with what you've been through, and that's where it's got me. I'm at peace with what I've been through, because I didn't just look at it. I've actually had to go through it and come out the other end. Like I said, I literally had to lose my mind.
Mm.
I can't even describe, I can't even put into words what I went through in that hole. Movies, they try to make movies about it. I remember they showed with Malcolm X. Remember the scene where they had him in the hole,
Mhm.
and you see him going through this agony. They're trying to capture that, but not even Hollywood could, because that's just a 5-minute clip. And then when it's in real life, it's those 5 minutes or feel like hours. Like when you're doing something you like or you're having fun, 5 minutes go by so fast. But when you're in a state of agony and torment, 5 minutes is forever. So 98 days is forever. 23 hours a day is forever. So, when you learn that and you get to that point where there's a breakage, when they say you got to hit the bottom, you come out the other end. There is a out the other end. And that's why a lot of times we're afraid to go all the way in, because we don't see an end to the tunnel. We think if we go through this again, we're going to get stuck there. No, you got to go through it again, come out the other side. And when you come out the other side, you're a butterfly. It's like, you go from caterpillar, you got to go through the cocoon. You got to get through it. We don't want to, oftentimes we don't want a cocoon because of the pain and the memories. It's not even the experience itself. It's the memory of the experience.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? So it really doesn't exist anymore. It only is what we make it. So we just got to get past the fears to get through the memory of those traumas so that we can actually find the light, in ourselves. And poetry does that, because the difference between rap and poetry, rap is hyperbole. Listen to rap. Everything is about, I got the big car, you're lying. You don't have all of that stuff. I know you. Your mom lived down the street. So it's like that you on there and the best rapper, it's about, how much you can exaggerate. But poetry is weighed and measured by how honest you are, how deep you are. See, honesty is depth. How deep, how honest can you be? And as poets, that's our power. That's our power. That's why there's proverbs that say the tyrant fears most the poet.
Mm.
Why would a tyrant fear a poet? Because a poet speaks the heart of the people. It gives shape. you know, to what they're feeling. It gives words to what they're feeling. That's why even to this day, to express love to people we didn't been around all our lives, we'll go to a song, you know, a sonnet, a song. Here, listen to this song. Of course, I've said it to you a million times, but this song here, you know, same thing with poetry. I've been through a whole lot, and I know that I've been through it, but the way that this person expressed it, you know, I see it in a different way. And that's that power. And I think, especially in this time where there is an agenda out after our children. I don't care what no one is telling me. I didn't grow up on TV. So when I come by, I see the television from a different way that other people may. Because kind of, you know, when you kind of groomed into something, you get desensitized after a while. For me, I'm looking everything. I put on Disney. I have Disney Plus, and it's talking about sexual content. Why is there sexual content on Disney? You put on rap music. It's about shooting it. Now you got kids out here doing murders on TV, you know, because they don't see the consequences of the action. They see the popularity that comes with it. And everybody feels that they can be a star and be famous now, and they use media to perpetuate this stuff. So there's an agenda, there's an idea being pumped at these kids, and we have to counter it in a way. We have to counter that. And I think one of the ways to do that is through music, through poetry. Because you're not going to just get a book down their throat. You got to speak it. Just like those rappers, it's the same art. If a rap could be bad for a child to listen to, then how much good can spoken word be? And that's how I do it. I'll get up there and I'll start talking about my life. Now they can relate. And then when I give them that poetry, that ain't the type of poetry that they're accustomed to. You know, that ain't roses are red, violets are blue. You know, and they relate. And then they find out that they have that in there. Give them a different perspective. Genius doesn't mean, you know, that you're smart. The word genius means the gift you're born with. Every one of us is a genius. And that just goes back to say we quench our baby's genius. The job in tradition, if we was to go back to traditional living, you know, traditional, not today's, you know, idea of what culture and tradition is, how we thought back then, what we taught back then. Back then, it was the child's responsibility to tell us who they were. In today's society, we raise our children to tell them who they are. And in the process, they become schizophrenic because they trying to live out who you said they are, but in their heart, they know that there's someone else. You see, that makes sense?
Yeah.
You know, so being able to tap into that with them, I use poetry to reach that, you know, and then I talk to them the way I'm talking now, and they get it. And I'm saying, you know, look, man, you are a genius. You don't be afraid of your gift, whatever it may be. If you like to draw on everything. That's what I tell people. If you like to write, if you like poetry, don't worry about grammar, spelling. It ain't our language anyway. It's a lingua franca. English is a lingua franca, meaning it's a bunch of languages made together just to make a language so that we can trade. Now I got something to give you. That means I can use any part of the language that I want to. So don't worry about the grammar. Only thing I'm concerned about is the honesty that you put forth, the sincerity that you put forth. And out of that comes integrity, you know. And when I say integrity, I'm not talking about integrity in the way that what will you do when nobody's looking. No, I mean integrity in the way that when you look at a building structure, they say the structure of the building has integrity. That means that everything that's needed for it to stay solid is intact. For us to have integrity, we got to be spiritually sound, mentally sound, physically sound, emotionally sound. And in order to get to that place, we got to talk to ourselves. And to do that, we got to journal. To journal, that's poetry. You see? And from that comes integrity. You'll see that most poets, though fragile they may seem on stage, they are the soundest among us in society.
I wanted to circle back to something you said. This is like a double question, but first, how did you got a life sentence? How did you stay hopeful? How did you, like you said, from while you were there, you were like, we're gonna get out and I'm gonna do X, Y, Z. How did you stay motivated and hopeful? And then once you were out, how did you not deal with that shame that you mentioned that so many people have when they and have peace with that? How did you combat all that?
Well, I wasn't always hopeful in there.
Mhm.
You know, it's up and down. And I tell people about that with faith. You know, a lot of people that's into faith and have faith. I say, look, don't beat yourself up if you lose faith, because faith, like energy, fluctuates. You know, you're not going to be happy every day. I wasn't hopeful every day. There was times where I despaired. There was times where I put a pillow over my head and cried, you know, because I didn't think I was going home. You know, I would see somebody get stabbed up and I would just, I'm tired of this, you know, and I would be like, man, I'm tired. And you don't see no end. You don't see it. But I had to train myself to see it. I had to imagine it. I had to see it in my head. I would lay down and put headphones on, put a song or a tape in, some Jill Scott or back then some Erykah Badu or some, you know, and I would have it in my head, and I was no longer in that cell. I was in my BMW rolling down Highway 1 with the top down, you know, and the music going. I was there. And I would do that often. And I would do that so often that I would literally do my taxes in prison. I don't have a job. I'm not even free. But I would say, okay, what is the tax percentage this year? And if I was making this and that, what would be my taxes at the end of the year? And I would literally get a notebook and do my taxes. You know, because in my mind, I'm saying, I'm going home, because I knew this couldn't be it. I went to prison at 16. I said, that don't, you know, if I was to look at a puzzle and I would say, man, this don't fit. I don't see me, you know, dying here. I was like, I've done too much. I've accomplished too much, good and bad. It can't end here. I was like, it had to be something else. And I knew that in my heart. I couldn't explain it, but I knew it. I'm not going to die here. And I used to have to remind myself that. But there were times where I didn't think that was going to be possible. You know, plenty of times. I was stabbed. That was one of them. I didn't even know if I was going to wake up the next morning. You know, because when they stab people up in there, sometimes they saturate the blade in feces and urine, so that it's toxic when they stab you with it. You know? And if you don't die from the actual injury, you die from infection. You know, so I'm sitting here with 2 holes in my side. One, I gotta avoid the officers. You know, I can't let them see the injury, because if they see the injury, that's a whole new case. I got to go to the hole and all of this stuff. So I'm like, I can't let them see the injury. I got my cellie who's stitching me up using iodine, dental floss, and a sewing kit. You know what I'm saying? He's literally stitching me up here. And while I'm laying in the bed, I'm not knowing if I'm going to wake up, you know, if I'm not going to blow up, you know, internal bleeding, because we know one of the signs of internal bleeding is if you wake up and your stomach is bloated, you have internal bleeding. So in the middle of the night, I'm grabbing my stomach, trying to make sure that I'm not bloated or anything, you know. So that was one of those times where I didn't think I was going to make it out of it, you know. But then there were also those times, like I told you, when I talked to my partner, I said, hey, we're going to be mentors and we're going to take kids. I saw that too. Just like I felt that despair, I was that hopeful when I told him that. I felt that. And people used to think I was crazy when I did it. You know, I talked like that. They would be like, this dude, man, you know, talk like that, you know, but it was still good to hear. You know, it was always good to hear.
Yeah.
What was, because just going back to it, getting that sentence at 16, I couldn't imagine like how, especially at that young age, like to keep that hope alive. Like what has been your biggest kind of motivation and inspiration up until this point to just keep you going?
Breath. Believe me when I tell you that. When I say, okay, when we talk about me making it here to this point, I've made it all the way here. There were people that were with me. You know, my best friend died 20 days after I got arrested. He was my crime partner. The police killed him. They arrested me. They killed him. And this was my best friend from, you know, kindergarten. And so when I get out and and I'm in the woods or I'm at a lake or I'm at a park, I could be at a stoplight sometime and I'll just get a burst of gratitude that, man, I remember one time about a couple of years ago, I didn't have a car, right? And I'm going back and forth to work on the train. And I'm videoing myself on the train, like, yeah, I'm on the train, right? And somebody said, "You're not ashamed of just, being on the train? You just posted it like I'm on the train." And I'm looking like, what's the shame in that? I didn't realize that it had a shame to it. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm tripping off of the fact that I'm on a train. I'm free, man. I'm on my way to work. You know what I'm saying? On the train, I'm smiling where everybody is upset. You know what I mean? I'm appreciating things that other people can't see because I know that there are people that didn't make it with. There are people that's still in there. There are people that's dead, that died in there. There are people that died on the street. And then there's people that's still in there, that got double life, LWOPs, they call them, life without the possibility of parole. Death row. I was just looking at a picture the day before yesterday of a friend of mine. And it was a school picture. And I didn't realize it was him. He's on death row. And his name is Rico. And I'm like, there go Rico. Oh my God. And I had to blow the picture up and was like, that's him right there. I haven't saw him in so many years since we were kids. You see, so when I get to where I'm at now and I'm appreciative, it's genuine. Breath every day, only thing I look for, and I always say, what will people say after I'm gone? What will people say about me after I'm gone? Before, he was a gangbanger. He was the life sentence. He was in prison. He's the convict. He's the ex-con. I went from little evil to Mr. Hill. You see what I'm saying? That took a lot. There was a lot to go through to get to that. And I didn't ask no one to give me that. You see, that was something earned. I didn't ask them to call me Mr. Hill, but I got my peers that call me Mr. Hill. The things that they laughed at, this guy on the train with a drum on his back. The ex-gang member, this dude had a reputation to be one of the baddest dudes out here, man. Now he's walking around with a drum on his back. But they don't see what I do. And they don't see, the beauty of it coming out. Just like I was at Panorama High School, and across the street, there's a Starbucks. And I'm getting my coffee. And the kid behind the counter, tall kid, is the manager. And he says, "Hey, you don't remember me?" No, no. And he said, "Don't you do poetry?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You play a drum and do poetry?" "Yeah." He said, "I was in Sylmore Juvenile Hall 4 years ago." And he said, "You came in and spoke with us." He said, "I'm a student now at Pierce College and I work here." And he told him, "Coffee's on me." Why I do it?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that. I didn't have that when I was out. You know, I grew up in a crack era. All of our mentors, parents, and heroes were on drugs. Superman was cracked out. You see what I'm saying? So when, you know, I see them now, you got that. You know, I know that I can give that. You got that. Because I didn't have it. And I tell them that. I didn't have it. Even getting out of prison after all of this time, they didn't have no program set up for us as lifers. I go into halfway houses and I talk to them. And, you know, and I tell them about my journey. I tell them how to go about getting their benefits. I didn't have that. I had a flashback getting out of prison, you know, from post-traumatic stress. Somebody dropped a knife into my workplace and I was, you know, and I realized that post-traumatic stress is not in the mind, it's in the body. The body reacts, you know, from memory of a trauma. My body was on flight. I was ready to go. That adrenaline you get before you get into an altercation, my body was doing that. But my mind is saying, you're tripping, bro. Just stay calm. Like, what are you doing? You tripping, bro. This is Buffalo Wild Wings, man. You know, but it was, I talked to the psych because I was on parole and fresh out then. And you know what he told me? Oh, you'll be okay. Smoke marijuana. I was like, that's it, wait. You know, what the hell? And then that's when I realized, okay, whatever growth, whatever I got to go through, I got to get through it. But the getting through it wasn't just the benefit for me getting out and by the graces of God, but it was also conversation for me to have for people that come after me. You see what I'm saying? So now I'm able to go into halfway houses and say, hey man, if you start getting migraine headache, this is because of post-traumatic stress. Your mind is not used to hearing all of these sounds. You're not used to seeing all of these colors. You're not, and sometimes that's going to play with your emotions. You're going to start getting frustrated, anxiety, angry. You know, you may wake up in the middle of the night, you know, not knowing where you are and not unable to breathe. I did all of that. I woke up in the middle of the night and I'm used to a wall being on my side. There was no wall, you know, and I was like, where the hell am I? So I'm trying to adjust. I'm in the halfway house in the home and I couldn't breathe because my realities were clashing. You see, my body was saying I'm in prison. My everything that was saying I'm in prison. But when I woke up, my environment was total opposite. And so I was literally had to clash between two worlds in order to adjust to this one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think something you said that's really important too is when you're telling these people like, oh, a headache and just the symptoms of how PTSD can manifest itself. I feel like for an average person too, it helps to know why something is happening so you can manage it in your mind. When you don't know what's going on, that adds layers to it. Like what's happening, you know, and especially if it's anxiety, that'll add an additional layer to it when you don't know. But when you have that information, I feel like it just helps so much. And then circling back to that shame part, you helping these people and giving people what you didn't have. Is that part of how you dealt with not having shame or about being out of prison and just in life in general? You're on the train, you didn't know that was something that was supposed to be shameful, which I don't think it is.
Oh,
But like you said, when a lot of people, when they get out of prison, they have too much shame to go do the things that you're doing. And so how do you get past that?
Well, like I said, I lost all the shame once I left that hole, that solitary confinement. So it became my personality. You know, it got to the point where I could speak that truth. And I was doing that in prison. Imagine being on a level 4 yard with nothing but killers and sociopaths, right? And you're telling them, you're projecting. You're dealing with shit that you had going on with your parents, man. They looking at you like, what are you talking about, man? And I'd be like, man, what do you mean, man? You think about this, man. Why should they let you back in society? You took a life, man. You took more than one life. And then you ain't done nothing in here to, you know, to better your situation. Why should they let you? And now they're looking at me like, man, what? Whose side are you on? It's not a side. You know, I'm dealing with the truth because I had to ask myself that. Why should you go home? That man is dead. And I answered my own question in that hole. You were still a child. And it came to me in a poem that wasn't mine, a poem that I read in another book. And it said, and in fact, it was on the movie Deep Cover. But I read the book. There was a book called The Player's Handbook. And it's all of these pimp poems in the 70s, right? Iceberg Slim and Donald Goins. And I don't know if you're familiar with all of these.
I read Iceberg Slim's Pimp, but I can't remember. I read it in high school, which is a long time ago.
I'm reading these books, right? And one of these books, there was a poem in it that said, "The jungle creed must feed on any prey at hand. I was labeled a beast and sat at the feast before I was a man." And I memorized that because it was me. You see, the jungle creed is my neighborhood, that whole gang street life. The jungle creed must feed on any prey at hand. That's what we did. We victimized people. We look for people to victimize. We walk down the streets as a gang to look for something to terrorize, something to vandalize. You see what I'm saying? On any prey at hand. I was labeled a beast. I was tried as an adult. I was no longer in the public eye considered as a child. You know, when they said you are tried as an adult, you know, they said that's it. I was labeled a beast and sat at the feast. In prison. I'm at the feast now. These where all of the beasts eat. I sat at the feast and I did all of this before I was ever a man. You know, so that poem even in itself was journey, because now I'm wrestling with what kind of man do I want to be? You know, and that leads me back to my grandmother, power of her too, because that shame. When I got arrested, I was arrested in her home. And I felt that I brought a shame on her, you know, that I couldn't undo because she died before I can get home. So she couldn't see the person that I had become. And in fact, even thinking about her, I had to ask myself, what kind of person have I become? You know, am I someone that she would be ashamed of? You see, I used to be able to hide the stuff that I did in the streets, you know, from my grandmother, but now that she's an ancestor, she sees me. And now, you know, I'm thinking like that. She sees me. Now, who am I portraying? Not only do she see me from a space that I can't even see myself. You know, so now that shame kicks in. Who are you, man? You know, who are you really? Why should I let you out? Why should you go home? Why should somebody even care that you sit in here? You know, what have I done, you know, for anybody to care? And when I started really thinking about that, you know, you'll see it. You start to act in that way. You start to move in that way. You know, even people started to notice it. They thought that I was going through depression and stuff like, oh, what's up, homie? You depressed? In a way, because I'm depressed about my state of where I am, not my circumstances around me. I'm depressed about the state that I'm in as a person, you know? And I was like, I don't have to be prison. I can show you prison pictures of me, I swear I can, where everyone is dressed up and they looking all tough and I'm looking like Dwayne Wayne from Different Matter. I swear you can find me in the picture. And everybody used to wonder why I dress like that, because I didn't want to become the environment I was in. Mm-hmm. You know, I used to always say, I don't want to be there. I don't want to, you know, to do this or do that. I wanted to be the opposite of the environment that I was in. Yeah. You know, and I became one of the first. I was a gang member. I was a blood. I became one of the first to cellmate with a Crip, just because I wanted to rebel against the norm. Then I became the first to cellmate with a Mexican, just because I wanted to, you know, against the norm. Mm-hmm. And I did these things, you know, throughout, always challenging myself that way, you know, throughout my incarceration. So when I did get out, shoot, I was like, Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. Look at here, Toto. That's how I felt.
A quick question about, and this is just my curiosity. Forgive me if it's an ignorant question, but when you said when you were 16 and like victimizing other people, what was the motive behind it? Was it fear? Like, I know they say stuff, you hear random stuff, but I'm asking the source, was at least someone who was a part of that at one point. Is some of that fear? Because like what you described sound like you were, for lack of better words, trying to scare these other people because you terrorizing them and victimizing them. Was any of that, was any of that fear from you?
Okay, that's the first level.
Okay.
Rage and fear are the same thing.
Okay.
They come from the same vein. When I was a child, my mom were in abusive relationships, starting with my dad. So I saw this physical violence against my mother. And as a child, I would jump into the fight. I would try to fight my dad. I remember being 6 years old, jumping in. Hey man, I'm in there. And I carried this, So it started off as a fear, but then it became an anger. Now I'm angry. Once my mom left my dad and then her next relationship, you see the same thing. Now I'm angry. I then went from fear to anger. And then once, I get at adolescent age and you got poverty kick in, drugs kick in, reality kick in. Now you're trying to find out who you are as an individual. You are no longer a child. Life experiences, have already done away with that. You've been, like they talk about arrested development, you've been hyper developed because of, your life experiences now. So now the only thing there is rage. I didn't have an understanding of what was going on around me. I had no control over it. So I became full of rage. See, gangs wasn't a bad influence on me. Gangs was a perfect vehicle for me to express a rage that was already there. I already had the rage there. So when I went out to attack people, it wasn't out of fear. It was out of a rage. We wanted to destroy everything. Why do you think in the LA riots, they go up so fast? That wasn't pre-planned. That's a rage that's always festering in the hearts of the youth. That's always there. In fact, Ernesto Che Guevara has said, a lot of people talk about Cuba. Fidel Castro as it relates to Cuba, but Ernesto was the mouthpiece. When Ernesto had pointed out in one of the books that he read, he said, every revolution will begin in the two institutions. He said the universities and the prisons. And he said the universities, when he referred to the universities, he referred to the fire of the youth. The fire of the youth, and as the prisons, the discontentment of the prisoner. Those two things together, fire, discontentment. Put them together, you got revolution. But the youth, we were discontented. And if you look at the gang thing, and this is another thing about my approach when I do mentor, I don't never tell them to stop gangbanging. I never try to take that from under them. I never snatch it. Why? Because it's an identity. And if you tamper with their identity, they'll fight you. What you have to do is to get them to reassess it. Look at it again. I tell them the word respect. I say, respect your hood. And they be like, what? Respect it. I say, you know what the word respect means? They be like, yeah. No, you don't. Respect means to look again. Re means to do again. Spec means to see. Spectacle, like spectacle glasses. Don't make a spectacle of yourself. Spectation, you know what I'm saying? Expectation, all of those comes from the word to see. So when I say respect, I'm saying to look again. So I tell them, look at your hood again. Now let's look at it. It isn't the fact that you got a hood that's bad. It's what you do. You see, if you was to take that same gang and you were to go out and do donations and start painting the community and doing all of this community research and outreach, you will be called an organization. But due to the fact that you vandalize and terrorize and you know, bring down the community, you can classify it as a gang. So same group, same youth. What are you doing? You see what I'm saying? And when I ask them that, what do your gang do? What do you do for the community? Because it started off as community outreach program. All gangs are supposed to be to protect their hood, protect their community. How are you protecting what you're destroying? Now they're looking again. And then I tell them, respect your hood. You see?
Yeah.
Look at it different.
Yeah. No, I love that idea. I've never really thought of respect in that way, but I love that, like how you're able to break it down. I guess just changing the subject a little bit. Now that you've gone through this journey and you've gotten to this point where you're a poet and author, like what do you consider success? Like I know we all have, like society has its own definition of success, but like what is your definition of success at this point?
For me, it's nothing material. You know, a lot of people get that confused, you know, that success has to be material. Honestly, I won't realize my success until I breathe my last.
Mm.
And that is, like I said, what will they say about me? Because I really believe that that's what heaven is. You, if that makes sense. When we do things, this is why they say legends never die. There is, you know, eternal life to, you know, what you give to the world. Look at what Hitler did. We still talking about this cat. You see what I'm saying? Malcolm. What do you think his success was? It wasn't realized until he breathed his last. Once he breathed his last, the whole world shook. And we realized his success. I won't know that until after I breathe my last. But I do know that it's a continuous thing. Every day that I'm able to do this, every day that I'm able, you know, to just take in air and, you know, and be positive to somebody. And even if I do something negative or harm somebody, if I'm able to go back and apologize and make amends and atonements for that, then I am successful. That means I'm still on this evolutionary path of growth. You know, once I stop doing that, then I'm unsuccessful. I don't know what it would take for me to be successful, but I do know the cause of unsuccess. You know? Like I might tell people, I don't know everything that I like. I'm still realizing the foods to eat, you know, because I'm used to prison mush. So I'm still learning. I just ate a dragon fruit for the first time the other day. So I don't know everything that I don't like. I mean, that I do like, but I do know what I don't like. That's why a baby's first word is often no, because negation comes before affirmation, you know. So I do know that much. My success will come in the, you know, in my last breath. So long as I'm always trying and growing, I'll continue in that success and I'll feel it.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like that was perfect on an ending note, because being mindful of time, we're running up on our hour. So what are any closing words, any more questions, Iman?
If you can, because I know, I'm sure you have some projects, and if you could just give us a little bit about the book that you've written and any projects that you have coming up.
Okay. Of course, I got the book, Serengeti Noise, you know, which is compiled poetry, a lot of the poetry that I wrote in prison. And I'm working on a second book called The Root, you know, so that one's coming out soon. And we still with Tia Chucha's Trauma to Transformation program, where we, you know, are working with at-risk youth and utilizing the arts to help them to address traumas that otherwise that they may not even know exist. So what we do is we try to transform that trauma. And the thing is about transformation is it's different than change. You know, we think transform and change is the same thing. but it's not. So we might not be able to change the conditions, but we can transform the condition, and we can transform what's also in ourselves. So we give that to them, and we're there. You can find us at Tia Chucha. Oh, we got a new location on Hubbard. In fact, I look it up. It's tiachuchas.org, tiachucha.org, and because it's the new location that we just got to, where you can come down and we have different type of workshops and programs that we have for the youth.
And do you want to share where to get can you get your book on that website or your Instagram? Okay.
Yeah. You can also find the book at tiachuchas.org because it's a bookstore, Centro Cultural and bookstore. So you can either come into the store and get the book, or you can order it online and I'll find it available.
Okay. Love it.
Nice.
Can I just ask, for the book that you have, how'd you decide on the title? I love the title. Like, what made you choose that title?
Well, prison. I was in, I looked at prison as the Serengeti. You know how you got all of these different type of animals, man. And I love watching National Geographic. I still do. But when you look at the Serengeti, it's brutal, especially when it get dark. You got the hyenas and against the lions, you got the baboons against the cheetahs, you got it gets brutal, right? Prison is that way. Prison, and I saw it as it was brutal. It had a rule to itself. It had a harmony to itself, that was hard to describe. That if you're not living on the plains, if you're not living in the Serengeti, you can't relate to that lifestyle. The same thing was with the prison. And the noise was the poetry. It's like, this is the noise that I'm making from prison. This is the noise that I'm making from the Serengeti. So if it's a roar or a scream, screech, a howl, whatever it is, these are the sounds that you hear in the jungle.
Yeah.
Love it.
Mm-hmm. There's so much to take away from what you said today. I hope we can have you on again, because we have a lot more questions.
I'd be honored. I'll be honored for real.
It's been great having you on. So we'll close. Was there anything else you wanted to share, Kesau'c?
Well, if you want a poem, I'll give a poem.
Yeah.
You're good with time to do a little bit longer?
All right, this is the signature poem. This is actually the last poem that I wrote in prison. I always tell people about it, and I always recite it because it's like a new beginning for me every time I'm able to mentor and I close with it. Because that was a closing of that chapter. Imagine after doing all of these years, 27 years, 8 months, 16 years old, that's your perception of the world that you left behind. You're 44 years old now, and they telling you go home tomorrow at 5 a.m. Be ready, have your stuff packed. I couldn't sleep. So I'm like, oh my God. I did whatever I do when I was feeling full of anxiety, I wrote. And this is the poem that came out. And understand that I don't have a preconceived notion of what I'm going to write when I write. When I feel like writing, I just go. Whatever comes out, it comes out, and then I shape it later, right? But this is the poem that came out, and it's called Still Good in Me. And I called it that because it's obvious that in the poem that I was wrestling with that. Remember, I told you why do I deserve to be free? And I had to remind myself that there was still enough good in me to deserve freedom. I don't need no one to tell me that. I have to first tell myself that, before I stepped out those walls, and this is the poem that I wrote that night. My father beat my mother into induced labor, having fist fights with grown men, always trying to save her. Hopes of being a kid again was something to save her. Never knew I'd see the pen but a few years later. A child made man in a man-made trial, then called by the world a life taker, a youth prison knife taker. Surrounded by concrete like the monkey god, man. Plus life began to look odd, and feudal lords and tribal wars was a world of chaos at its core. A little brother gang banging at the door and scraping brothers up as a chore. At first death haunted, trained by 4300 and preying on the faces that look haunted. My habitats like iron woods, body tatted, a pup running with wolves, but I was searching for a part of me still good. The graffiti on the wall says no warning shot. And the will to survive now is all I got. Not to mention, I've been praying a lot. But the rage got my emotions in a knot. Like a burner in the place of a Glock or a best friend shot on a prison yard smoking pot, listening to pop. Hard lessons at night point I'm forced to learn. While shot callers doing shoe terms, politicians treat the subject like a germ. Meanwhile, breath is my only concern. Born with the kind that kill perm. This must be a glimpse of how hell be. Knowing only God can help me. The devil's been trying to melt me, but that's not the life I was dealt, see? I knew that there was still good in me to see the man that I could be, should be, would be. That's when the reality of it all took me. You see, they wanted me repentant. That's why they called it the penitentiary, and it's been that way for centuries. The homies ain't been keeping it G, and the madness was making me lonely. Tired of the situation owning me, I needed freedom. Like a twisted soul down on its knees, or how a mother grieves for all the things that I've seen. Her gang-banging little boy out there running the streets, man, she had the whole church praying for me. But there was a rage in me, the need for caging me. I wish that was strange to me, but that there was the good with it. You see, I knew I could be repentant, but I had blood-spilled enemies who hated the thought of forgiving me, with the thirst for a rep, dreams of killing me. Still, the efficaciousness of prayer was healing me. I was a little boy living life like a grown man, but being guided by a strong hand. Understand? While raised by the best of society's rejects, my honest now reflex to see how deep my thoughts get, like knowing how cold the dark gets, but that hadn't touched my heart yet. If standing on my own to is success, I got that. After falling short, man, I'm right back. A tortured soul that wouldn't crack. I bled for it. I cheered for it. I killed for it and served 27 years for it. But my Lord didn't bring me this far to blow it. There's something in me, man. I know it. I see it now despite the hood in me. I'm my mother's child, so there's good in me. A service to God and family with dignity as it should be. So like Los Angeles and them palm trees, tomorrow I'll lift my head and be free.
Love it. That was amazing.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And a Serengeti noise. So we'll put links in our show notes of where they can get it, and Tia Chucha's and all that. So.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll close out. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us and inspiring our listeners to redefine success for themselves and giving us that beautiful poem.
Mm-hmm. And of course, thank you, listeners. We could not do this without you. Remember to hit like, subscribe, and comment on this episode. We always appreciate your feedback. Remember to subscribe at U Plus Happy podcast, available on YouTube, and follow us on Instagram at U Plus Happy.
We'll see you next week, same time, same place. And we have our guests say our tagline, which is, we'll show you our definition of success if you show us yours.
Yes. Thank you. I'll show you my definition of success if you show me yours.
Yep. Thank you so much.